What's going on, everybody? This is Walt Blackman, and sorry I am late. If you live in the Snowflake area, you would have known we had a huge storm that came through here, knocked all the electricity out, at least on our block, and it just came back up. About 7:24 came back up, and wanted to make sure that I got on here. I left a little message on Facebook today and said, if it doesn't come back on, man, we'll have to be off of the air today. But now we are back on, and guess what? Tomorrow is the day. Tomorrow is election day. Well, we've had elections pretty much all month. You know, you know how that goes. So yeah. So it's election day tomorrow. A lot of you already went out and voted. So that's good. I'm glad you were able to do that. Also, thanks for coming on. Do appreciate it. We got folks just jumping on right now. That is so awesome. Y'all are already jumping on. That means our folks we're getting more folks on our shows here. Hold on. We're getting more folks. I had to bring it up a little bit. Yeah, we're getting more folks on, and that's really good. And it's really awesome to be able to get on here, communicate, talk about what's going on. Remember, if you want to be able to call in to the show, all you need to do is dial that number 435-383-8113. Or if you want to go check it out on my website or Facebook or YouTube, all you need to do is go over to one of those channels and click on it. Remember, you will not be able to send me a message, a SMS message from Twitter. I don't know why they're not letting folks do that, but however, we'll get that thing worked out and we'll be able to get it. So let's talk about, well, first of all, I want to kind of talk about the Constitution and how it applies to or what's going on today in our elections. We need to kind of talk about that. And the reason why I want to talk about that is because a lot of people forget the fact that the reason why a lot of folks get to vote is because of the Constitution and because of the brave men and women that actually went out and gave of their service, in some cases their lives, to give us that right to be able to have the right to vote, actually. And I think that's important. Okay, and the Constitution is still protecting Americans today, and it's important that we understand that. So again, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Walt Blackman Show tonight. Again, we're going to be talking about the foundation of our republic, and then ask me anything of the United States Constitution. The Constitution was written to establish our government, believe it or not. It was a divided government, and it was a brand new government, if you know that. And it's been around, a little bit over 2 centuries. And now, 250 years later, we've got an important questions to ask. Now, is the Constitution still protecting American people today? Or are politics and politicians, both in both parties, are they ruining that Constitution? Now, this doesn't just mean Republican or Democrat. What this typically means is that every elected official, they take an oath, and that oath is to support and defend the Constitution. Now, that oath should matter. It should matter regardless of the party you belong to. It should matter regardless of your ideology, because that Constitution, now this is for, now if you hear noise in the background, that's my pets. It shouldn't matter. And then when we are seeing folks that are violating may be violating their oath to office. That's a big problem to me. I know it may be a big problem to you, but it shouldn't matter of who controls the White House or Congress. Now, the courts and the state government, we have a plan at as well. We need to make sure that we are not violating our oath. And I want to hear from you. I want to hear your disagreements about it. I want to hear your thoughts about it. And I want to know, does the Constitution actually do what it's supposed to do? Or does the Constitution not do what it's supposed to do? And how does that affect our votes that we're going to be seeing coming in tomorrow? Now, before we dive right into that, let me talk to you really quickly about how these dumps are going to go when we're talking about tomorrow.
You are so dumb. You are really dumb, for real.
So here's how those dumps are going to go. The polls close at 7, if I'm right. They close at 7. We will start seeing dumps around 8, maybe 9. And what those dumps mean are every county, when they are counting their votes and they are tabulating, they send their totals to the Secretary of State's website. And it updates. Every time there's a dump, the votes update. So you'll be able to track the amount of votes that your candidate has received. You'll also be able to see what precincts have voted, what counties have completed, if they're 100%, or so on and so on and so forth. Now, it takes pretty much all night to do. Now, this is the part that really gets me. We've been voting all month, pretty much for 30 days. Folks have been voting, early ballots, mail-in, so on and so forth. And it's going to take us probably a few days before we figure out really who wins the elections. Now, in some cases, you'll see the blowout in there. If a person has a wide margin of points or votes, you can kind of tell, particularly if it's like over like 50, 60%, you're going to know pretty much that person's going to win their race. Now, some of these closer races, like in some of these LDs, LD2, I think it's LD10. There are a few LDs out there that we've got to watch. We got to make sure that we're paying close attention to some of those races. It's going to be pretty much a late night for some candidates. Okay, because of the amount of time it takes. When we're talking about at the state level, we're talking the governor, Secretary of State, Superintendent of Public Instructions, Treasury, Attorney General's race. That really is going to depend on where they are in the polls right now. So, for example, Andy Biggs, that's a no-brainer. He will probably go through tomorrow night with a high margin between him and the other candidates, because he's been polling pretty high the whole primary season. So he'll get his. We'll figure out who's going to be going to the primary in the governor's office pretty quickly. I would say about 2-3 hours after the polls close. Now, we're talking about Attorney General. That's another story, because I don't know how the polls really look with the Attorney General's office. That's Warren Peterson and Rodney Glassman. They're both attorneys. They both had debates against each other. That's another story. I think that should have been probably, somebody should have pulled the plug on the TV on that thing, because that was insane. Then we got Kimberly Yee that is running for the Superintendent of Public Instructions against Tom Horn, who is the current holder of that seat. And then we have our Treasuries race. So those races, I have not seen the polls on those races. So I really cannot tell you when the returns will come in for those, and when we can kind of tell when who's winning or who's not winning, and we will see that. I got some pings going on here. Let me see what we got here. Remember, you can call in if you would like to the show, or you can leave a message and we will certainly answer it. It's Ask Me Anything Tonight, AMA. Right now, we're talking about the returns on the elections. I will not be on tomorrow night because, of course, I'll be watching my own election and watching the other elections that are going. Now, before I go any further, I want to say good luck to all the candidates that are running, whether you are wherever you're at on the spectrum. Good luck. Really hoping that folks have the type of successful, hey, good evening, have the type of successful evening that folks are looking for, hoping their candidates win. I know folks, they want that to happen. And just good luck to everybody. Remember, at the end of the day, we are all on the same team. Yeah. So we got to remember that we are all on the same team because we, excuse me, we all fall under the Constitution. At the end of the day, we are all Americans. However, maybe we should remember that when we are actually in the primary process, when we are running for office. Now, as I was saying the other day, you see a lot of bad ads go out. You see a lot of mailers go out. I'm not going to really get too much into that anymore because we really talked about that. However, I hope you learned from that, and I hope that you take that into account when you go vote or when you've already cast your vote. Now, at this point right now, I am a firm believer that 80 to 85% of the people already know who they're voting for. The night before, if they haven't already voted already, they probably know who they're voting for going into tomorrow. So I would say thank you for doing your due diligence and your civic responsibility to vote. Thank you for doing that. Let's go ahead and read a question real quick. Does the Constitution still apply? Yes, I think that it still applies. The problem is it's not being applied, and what is being applied has been twisted for special interest. I agree 100% with that. As I have said in the past, that if we followed the Constitution to the letter, we wouldn't be in debt, or there wouldn't be a deficit, because taxpayer dollars are not supposed to go to special interest groups. And you may be saying, well, they don't go to special interest groups. Well, they do. And let me kind of run it down how they do. So when you pay taxes, they go to the federal government. It goes into their general fund. Their general fund is basically their feed bill. That feed bill feeds all the other agencies in the federal government. Now, when those dollars hit the other agencies, those agencies have contracts with NGOs. And some of those NGOs have subcontracts that offer grants, that offer contracts, so on and so forth. And some of those NGOs are special interest groups. The Constitution clearly says that taxpayer dollars are not supposed to go to special interest groups. However, as I have just walked it to you, your tax dollars do. In some way, shape, or form, your tax dollars at the end of the day will hit a special interest group. Now, if you don't know that, that's okay. And now you do. And I love the question that was just put up here, because that's exactly true. Our Constitution gets twisted when that happens. Now, when we're talking about folks, I just said that if we followed the Constitution to the letter, we would not be in debt. And that's actually true. Because what is the function of the legislative branch, the Congress? Their function is to fund the federal government, not NGOs, not organizations that were executive ordered in. That's not part of the process. As I said before, Thomas Jefferson once said that each generation should be able to pay their debt on the federal government that's owed. So if we are really following that Constitution, then guess what? There are a lot of things that would be changed. Now, it actually, when we're talking about the Constitution, and I was talking about those NGOs, sometimes the federal government will have unlimited authority. And that is not how the founders wanted this to happen. Now, what does that got to do with elections? Well, anything that the federal government has their hands in, to include our elections when they're not supposed to, because those are state obligations, and the state has the authority to run their elections in the shape and way and manner that they are supposed to run their elections. However, the federal government does have their hands in our local elections. Now, I'm not talking about what's going on in the news now. I am talking about for generations and for years and for decades, the federal government has had a hand in our elections at the state level. Now, how do we know that? Well, when somebody shows up on the ballot or shows up as a win that does not live in your state, they're running for Congress, they don't live in your state, what have you, or they don't live in the district, they just show up, they have all this money behind them, millions of dollars that they are putting towards their campaign. And you're like, where did this person come from? Never heard of this person. A lot of those folks have been placed in spots by special interest groups, some from political parties like the NRC, not the NRC, the Republican Party, the Democrat Party, DNC, NRC, DNC, are PACs that feed off of some of our parties, like the GOP. So we have a lot of folks playing in our local elections, not just here in Arizona, but across the nation. Now, this is something I really want you to think about. And then it was a really good question when we were talking about how it applies, how the Constitution applies. Okay. I like to look at this in detail about the separations of powers. The question is, do we have a separations of power based on what the Constitution says? Not just with this administration, but I am talking administrations in the past. For example, the Obama administration, his second term, they ran on executive orders. The Constitution clearly states that there is some pushback in the Constitution that the executive cannot cross over to the legislative branch. Now I want you to listen to this. When we don't pass a budget, when the federal government does not pass a budget, it typically gets kicked down the road. However, if you paid attention, when they kick that can down the road, it opens the door for the executive to actually go across the separation of powers and do unauthorized spending using executive orders. So when that happens, they're just not just kicking the can down the road. What they are doing is they are allowing, and it doesn't matter who's in charge, they are allowing the executive to not only enforce those laws that the Congress and the Senate put forward, they are allowing the Congress and the legislative branch to give up their authority, particularly the Congress, of controlling the purse. Think about that. Think about every single time that the budget was not passed. And then we have, and this really gets me. We'll have a group that, and it does not matter what party. They'll stand up and beat their chest and say, we held the line. Well, do you really want to know how much of that that budget is a continuation? It's not the essential services. It's not the Department of Defense, the water, economic security. It's none of those things. It's not education. It is none of those things. Those things do not get touched when we have a shutdown. They don't. They still get funded. They get funded because that is in the Constitution. You want to know where the bottleneck is? The bottleneck is the dollars that they put in called fatback. I call it fatback. The deal is we have folks that don't have enough political courage to really stand up and say why they want these gimmicks in the budget. That's what they're kicking down the road. When someone say, well, there's something in the NDA that is not right. That's not it. That's not it. It's something of a special interest group or some sort of dollars that they want to attach to the general fund budget. And that's the part they can't agree on. However, funding essential services, that's the Constitution says they have to do that. But when they don't do that and they're holding out because of some, pork fund that they want in the budget, then there's this big to-do about holding the line. Now, that's BS. You're holding the line because you want some of your pork fat in that budget. That's what you're doing. And that's what I'm talking about, transparency. On one of my podcasts, I clearly lay that out of why we go into these continuations. Imagine this. And I'll get to your question. Imagine this. You're at home balancing your budget, and you say to your better half or your other half, hey, look, honey, we're going to not pay the mortgage this week. We're going to kick that down the road. But what we're going to do is we're going to take the money from the mortgage and pay the light bill and do a continuation on the budget or on the mortgage. Do you really think that your mortgage company is going to stand for that? So in a nutshell, when we are electing people to these offices, we need to make sure we ask the question, what is your job in the Congress that mandates that you pass this budget using legislative dollars to Congress? What article is that, or what subsection is that in Article 2? What is it? And if the folks you were electing can't answer something like that, and it is not the Second Amendment, I get that sometimes. Article 2 is the Second Amendment. No, it's part of the government guy. They should know some of this, particularly the people that are in Congress. Let's go ahead and get a question in here. Okay, I understand that the states are recognized to run their own elections, but at what point did the states have so much power to control the federal election results to the point of corrupt results? Wow, that's a great question. That's called overreach. And a lot of times that is who we are electing into office at the federal level. Now, the Constitution does say that states run their elections. However, if the states aren't doing something, I got to find that piece in the Constitution. If they're not doing something that they're supposed to do while running their elections, then the federal government can come in. If they are breaking the law or so on and so forth, I will find that piece in the Constitution that it says. And I think to your question, that is probably what we are seeing a lot more of. That's giving states overreach into control, the federal elections. Now, tomorrow, when you go to the polls, you should be asking yourself, or tonight, you should be asking yourself, okay, yeah, you know what is really going on? And are those separations of powers, the three branches of governments that places limits on how the government treats its people during election season? What's going on with that? I really believe that because of the overlaps that we are seeing in the federal government with the lack of separations of powers, and I'm not talking just this administration, I'm talking for decades, this has happened. Is that a clear and present danger to the citizens of this country? Me and you, taxpayers, the people that walk around and pay our taxes. Is that a clear and present danger? That is a question that needs to be answered. I love these questions that are coming up. In the military, the rule was you can add to a regulation, but you can't take away from it. Bam. Yeah. You can add to it, but you can't take it away. You can add to the Constitution, but you can't take it away. Now, you can add with an amendment that actually negatively affects something in the Constitution, but you can't take that out. You can't take that out. It's like, for example, the Second Amendment. You can't take away the Second Amendment, but you can add something to that amendment in a subsection that actually weakens the Second Amendment or the First Amendment or one of the branches of government. Really quickly, and speaking of the branches of government, I was watching this YouTube, and there was this guy going around asking, what are the three branches of government? And I mean, I'm asking folks that are very verbal about things, and constitutionalist. I said, okay, what are the three branches of government? The preamble, really. I was like, you have to be kidding me. You have to be kidding me. And I'm just amazed. And it just blows my mind how something so basic like the three branches of government, it's just crazy. Or the question is, okay, what articles, are there? Jesus. Wow. I need to move on. Let me go ahead and finish reading these questions. Okay. You can add to a regulation, but you can't take away. Now it's like the states override the federal laws that have they have too much, but DC doesn't put a stop to it. I call that political courage or lack thereof. The federal government has to stay in their lane just like the state has to stay in their lane. Now, I know in Arizona, I really get upset as a lawmaker when the federal government reaches down and tells us what to do as a state. The problem is we have some folks that are reaching up trying to control the federal government. And there's a history of that. There's a huge history of states, not only in Arizona, but states across this union that have their House legislators or their state assemblies or state houses have influenced the federal government. Now, some folks will say, well, that's supposed to be because the states built the federal government. You are absolutely right. However, the states should not dictate the separation of powers and how it is applied. Hey, Sandy, how you doing? I like that. I'm going to put this up here right here. Sandy, my good friend, who is running for office down in Pinal County, and she is awesome. And she says, staying in your lane locally. And I will tell you, at the state level, we have some folks that will try to write laws that interfere with county and municipalities. And those same folks who do that, who write those types of laws, when we get something from the federal government or the state tries to send something to the federal government, well, they can't do that. We're a sovereign state. Yeah, I got that. So why are we trying to knuckle down with our counties and municipalities? So when you go into the booth tomorrow to vote, understand what is actually happening and how the Constitution directly ties into who you are voting for, particularly at the federal level and then at the state level. And I will tell you, at the state level, you not only need to understand the United States Constitution, you better know something about the state constitution of Arizona. And a lot of people don't know that. And when folks don't understand the state constitution of Arizona, then bad things tend to happen. And that's where we see the overlap on both sides. Okay, that's where we see that overlap. Now, little schoolhouse rock for folks, we know Congress writes the law and the president enforces that law. And the courts interpret the law. They interpret it. So think about our election laws. Who is writing our election laws and how are they being enforced? Well, I can tell you at the legislative branch, we are writing election laws. However, the Secretary of State's office, they have an election manual that they interpret those laws how they would like to interpret it. Now, I'm not saying all of it, but that's what I've seen in the past. Now, what I just said, the separations of powers, the Arizona Supreme Court or the courts are there to interpret the laws of Arizona or the election laws, not the Secretary of State's office. That shouldn't happen, but we see it happen all the time. There's a manual out there that the Secretary of State's office they're supposed to use that manual to run those elections. However, a lot of times what I have seen, and that's not just, and it's seen that in many administrations, they have written, they interpret it. And then that's when we see elections get mucked up. And when that happens, that's household six. When that happens, at the end of the day, folks saying our elections are messed up, and because we're not separating those powers. But in the same token, the federal government, they're not separating their powers. We need to get back to that. Now, just like at the federal government, each branch has to check each other. So if we're having a problem with our elections, right, the branches have to check each other. If you look at the Arizona Constitution, when it's talking about elections, and some folks don't like me to say this, but it's in the Constitution that a county, if a county does not agree or have doubts on how their elections are being ran, the machines, then they have the option, based on a vote, to be able to close that loophole and go to another method. County boards of supervisors have that right to do. However, we have an attorney general that has knuckled down on counties that if they do that, then they are facing prosecution. How can you prosecute someone or a county or an agency when they are not breaking the law? They are following the Constitution by finding the loophole. But it has to be a lack of confidence on how their election is being ran. Just it could be the opposite too. If a county is using paper ballots and not machines, and if they feel like it is not being run efficiently, or there's something nefarious, or so on and so forth, then guess what? The counties have that option to be able to do that, but they haven't done that because they've been threatened. Now, why do I say that? We have a lot of folks a few years ago that ran around and made all this noise about machines. I don't like machines. I think we should vote paper ballots. However, if some of these same folks would have read the Constitution, picked it apart, found those loopholes like those attorneys did, they would have known that counties were able to do that, and they could have went to their county board of supervisors. Why? Because Pinell tried to do that, and they were threatened. I think it was Pinell, their county boards of supervisors. They were threatened by the Attorney General's office. So if it's not in the law, well, they wouldn't have done it. So it's there. But we have a lot of yahoos that run around, and instead of doing their due diligence, reading and understanding the Constitution and the United States Constitution, guess what? We create new problems for us when those problems that we've created, they could have been head on. Now, imagine if all 15 counties in 2020 did that. Followed the Arizona Constitution and says, bam, it says this in the Constitution. We're going to exercise our state constitutional rights. Imagine where we would be right now, because a lot of that could have been solved. Second thing about elections. Let me go ahead and read this one. I'm still trying to figure out how certain states were able to change their own election laws on the fly, like right before or during the election, like they did last time. How can that be controlled? That's a great question. States have a right to be able to do that. Legislatures have a right to be able to, as the Constitution says, run their elections in a place and a manner that they see fit. That means the legislative branch can go in and change their elections, change how it's being ran, as long as it is constitutional. When it is not constitutional, the federal government is supposed to step in and say, you can't run your elections that way. And who does that? Not the executive, not the legislative branch, the judicial branch, and they do that by the courts. because it's a constitutional issue. Something in the Constitution was broken. However, I have seen that. I've seen that. I think Texas did something. I'm wearing a Texas hat. I think Texas did something like that. Now, for Arizona, in order for us to change something in the election laws, we would have to go into a special session because we get out of session well before the elections. Now, there's nothing to say that it can't happen while we're in session. Case in point, the primary date was moved back. The primary date tomorrow is the primary date. We would actually be going into August, I think. And every year that I've been in there, it seems like somebody is adjusting that election date. The only thing I think we should be doing as a legislative branch when we're dealing with those elections, Petra, is if we are going to change the longevity of how long we vote. A month is too darn long. For crying out loud. A month? And then it takes us until Christ returns to get the returns back? Come on. President Peterson of the Senate had a bill that actually would have fixed that. Tomorrow would have been election day. We would have known who won these races last night. Now, here's the deal on that as well. When that happens, and when that bill gets vetoed by the Democrat governor, Katie Hobbs, the question we should be asking ourselves, not just as lawmakers, but as the electorate, constituents, why would you veto something that is more efficient? You're in office. You have the executive. Why would you veto something that Arizonans want? This bill wasn't just brought out of the blue. This bill that he wrote was a bill that was ran through polls through Arizonans. And I will tell you, Republicans, Democrat, and independent voters like the ideal of being able to get their returns back that night. Didn't happen. We're going to be waiting tomorrow night for a long, long time. Did we do this one? Yeah, we did that one. We're going to be waiting a while until our returns come back. Remember, Christ will be here before we get our returns back, probably. And I'm glad you asked that question. It all goes back. I think it all goes back to checks and balances. Now, I will say that Washington, D.C., they are broken. Not everybody up there that is working in D.C. We've got some great folks that come from Arizona that are representing us. And I mentioned them the other night. Gosar, Crane, Biggs, Swikert, Ciscomani. Yeah. Some of those folks are working hard. But when you look at the Congress as a whole, collectively, they are a broken organization. How many bills has Congress passed? Think about it. How many bills? I'm talking meaningful bills. I'm not talking about putting a new statute in the rotunda. How many real bills of substance has Congress passed? We already know they're not passing a budget. It's a continuation. We're on a continuation right now. Parts of that budget. But think about that. And those are that's the type of information you should be taking into the booth when you vote. We need to look at, and then let's look at the state. Let's look at closer to home, the legislature here in Arizona. When you're looking at your district, how many bills of substance has your lawmaker gotten passed or have been part of, a co-sponsor, or worked on the bill with the sponsor? How many? Because it's easy to be the loudest in the room. It is something different to be able to work with people to get bills passed. Now, I've had a lot of bills passed. I brought a lot of money into the county and to the district and to the state. Now, there's some folks that think that I haven't brought enough dollars into the district and some parts of the district. But that's because there's no money. However, we need to look at that. When you are voting, when you are going down that sheet, those are the things you should be thinking about. What has this lawmaker done? I can't stand him, but I'm not voting for his person or her personality. I am voting on what they have done. And if it's bad, don't put them back in there. If it's good, rehire them. That's why every 2 years is pretty good, because you've got 2 years to see if the person is going to improve or if the person's not going to improve. But if we keep electing the same people at the legislative branch or at the federal level, and they are not doing their jobs, and some of these questions that came up here today, which are good and valid questions that are still out there, who's to blame? It's not the corrupt lawmaker that's going up there. And if we know they're corrupt or they're taking vacations everywhere, it's us. It's the voter. We control, to a certain extent, that outcome. We do at the state level more than we do at the federal level. But government works best when it's close to the people, local government. So in your communities, wherever your community is, take a look and say, okay, let me see what this person has done. Let me rip up that mailer and let me really look at it. Maybe that's why a month is good. I don't know. But we control that, particularly at the state level. And if we're sending up people that shouldn't be there, if we're sending up people that are that are nothing but slogans, that's it, then that's our fault. And then unelected bureaucrats. They have it at DC, we have it here at the state. There are a lot of times that these unelected bureaucrats are actually running the show. When people say, let's talk about the roads. We talk about 260 coming up from Payson to my area. That road is a death trap. Unelected bureaucrats and some of these agencies have slow walked some of these projects. Now, if they're listening right now and they're upset about that, I don't care. It should not take, since Moses put the animals on the boat, and we're still trying to deal with it now, to get a road fixed. Because you get funded every year. You get a transportation budget. And then I'm hearing, whoa, the priority in the road projects. Maybe we need to take a better look at that, because when we have roads, state roads that are broken, and they are on a long list of wait time. And they say they have these priorities with emergencies or this or that. Come on, man. Come on. The 17, I think for like 2 years or 3 years, they were working on the 17. I want to know who's picking and choosing. That's winners and losers right there. That is one example of unelected bureaucrats that are running our state how they want to run it. Now, as a legislative branch, we need to get better at that. And it's just not. I know the governor, whoever the governor is, they pick their directors of these agencies. I got that. The Senate approves them, and then they go on to work. What I think we need to be doing for some of these unelected bureaucrats that are elected or that are appointed to some of these positions in Arizona is that we run them through this process, not every 8 years or whenever we change out a governor. They need to be run through the process every 2 years. And why is that? So we can nail them down and ask them, why is it taking so long to do this? The Department of Corrections. As of today, Arizonans are going to be paying more money because a judge has put Arizona Corrections in receivership. And why is that? Because we have a healthcare problem in our prisons. And it hasn't been fixed. And we've had director after director after director that go in there, unelected bureaucrats, and do whatever that they are doing, don't want oversight, spending up to $2 billion of Arizona taxpayer dollars, and we are still getting the same results. The same results. I ran a bill this past year with Senator Bullock for an oversight, to oversight them. What Republicans do. How much money are you spending? Why are you spending it? And why are we in receivership? Basically. Now, the darn governor created the damn office last year, but imagine creating an office, but you don't put any darn money behind it so we can figure out what's going on. $1 million, $1.5 million to fund that office to see what is broken, which would have saved taxpayer dollars. We're spending up to $2 billion in our budget, not to mention the money we're being sued for as a state. You're trying to tell me that $1.5 million is not a good investment to figure out if we can save some taxpayer dollars? Those are the types of things that we are seeing from unelected bureaucrats. However, looking on another side, has your elected member in the Arizona House or Senate what have they done to save taxpayer dollars? What have they done? Here we go. Okay. Just like we used to have to go stand in front of the NCO board is the non-commissioned officer promotion board. To get promoted, those unelected bureaucrats ought to have to go to the citizens board before they are put in the position. I agree with that 120,000%. They should have to go to the public. Now, they're probably saying, well, since they go to a Senate hearing to get confirmed, they are essentially going to the public. But I like the idea they stand in front of those folks. Okay, and what are you going to do other than just get appointed? I don't know, maybe next year, we get people to go to the Capitol or whoever is the governor And whoever appoints, doesn't matter what side of the aisle they're on, when they go in front of the Senate, maybe folks should go down there and do the request to speak, just like we do any other piece of legislation, and say, okay, I did my research on this person, and this person has connections to special interest. Why is that person being considered? And looking at the nominee, and what are you going to do to separate yourself from those special interest groups? Instead of asking those tough questions, we ask the populist questions. Now, I'm not talking on this passport. I'm just saying, just speaking out loud. How about we start not only just asking them tough questions, how about our lawmakers who are trying to get elected? How many hard questions? And I know people are busy and they work and so on. And we're going a little bit longer tonight because I wasn't on last night and I was late tonight. How many folks that are on the ballot, your ballot, did you had an opportunity to ask tough questions? I'm not talking about the 90,000 foot question. I'm talking about tough questions. You want to know why I don't like, I appreciate these groups who do the candidate forums. I really do. There's a gentleman, a former veteran, or he is a veteran, a former full bird colonel. He actually did the last form in Payson. His name is, I call him Kenny. He does radio on KMOG. This guy, if you can get this guy to host, not host, but to moderate your debates or your forums, you do that. Call KMOG. If you are a whatever group you're in, and say, hey, we're hosting a debate or a forum. Can we talk to Kenny to see if he can come down and host it for us? This guy is good. Now, again, I appreciate groups that do forums, but we need to do debates, because what a debate does, that will tell voters what that person really knows and what they don't know. Forums, all they do, folks who don't know what they're talking about, repeat the things that the people do know what they're talking about. That's all they do. That's all they do. And if you got like 5 people on a forum, you're only going to get probably 2 questions where you are going to have to start off and answering that questions. But the rest of the questions, if you don't know them, you just listen to what somebody else is saying, and you come across looking like you know what you're talking about. We've got a person in my race who does that. I've said some answers, and this person said the same thing I said. I'm like, wait a minute, I just said that. So how do we really know? We need to debate. Candidates that are running for state office need to debate. No forms, but debate the issues. Debate the issues so people can know. And then those debates should be broadcasted live on whatever platform they have. So those folks who can't make those debates, they can see what candidate knows what they're talking about and what candidate doesn't. Because again, it's real easy to sit up there and copy somebody, or it's real easy to give a 90,000 foot answer. It's real easy, but it's harder. It is harder to debate that. Somebody says something and you know it's wrong. Guess what? You're gonna go back against them. When I was running for Congress, I had a debate. It was on the news TV. And this one dude said something about, I forget. it was, I'll find it and I'll put the link in when I come back on the air. However, I had a chance to debate this person. And not only did I prove this person wrong on the air, live TV, this person looked at the camera and said, yeah, Walt's right. That is what we need, spirited debate. So constituents and people who vote can see, can hear what that candidate is talking about and their plans. And I think we need to do away with these freaking scorecards. Because people get around, they talk about these scorecards. And then folks take a scorecard to the booth and they vote on the scorecard. The scorecard will only record probably 4 or 5, maybe 6 bills that special interest group wants. Scorecards come from special interest groups. I've been on scorecards. However, I won't do or say something that I won't apply to myself. That's being a non-commissioned officer. But some of these groups that put candidates on these scorecards and give them A's on these scorecards, they are only grading those candidates on a certain amount of votes. And the ones that are not in office are the ones that they want to be in office because they know that the person they put on those cards or those endorsements are going to vote the way they want them to vote. Now, it's not everybody's going to do that because sometimes the candidates don't have any control over who endorses them. But if you're voting off a scorecard, doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. You have to know the whole story behind why they're on a scorecard. Why there may be a new candidate on that scorecard. It's because they're going to vote the way that special interest wants them to vote because they've met with them. And it doesn't matter what group it is. It's a special interest group. And I'm not saying, I'm speaking out loud. I'm not saying anybody on the scorecards or anybody who's endorsed is not worthy to be on those cards or what have you, because I've been on cards. However, we should not use that as a baseline to bring to a debate. Because you can be on a scorecard and have 100, but not know what the hell you're talking about when we're talking about mitigation of forest fires. Or what happens after a forest fire in, I don't know, Flagstaff, when everybody goes home, but there is flooding from putting out those fires. I don't know. Or how about water? I had an interview the other day on Kenny's show, came on, we were talking about water. Or K through 12 funding, or why some rural communities need a food tax. Or why are we just, I don't know, giving 4% pay raises to Department of Public Safety troopers instead of the 15% to bring them to parity? Whose fault is that? Why are we not doing that? Or talking about tax breaks for folks that are over 60, no tax on tips. Get into the meat of it. Well, why do you support the big beautiful bill as it is applied to Arizona? Sometimes people say, well, it's a big beautiful bill. But they don't know why we have that. To make sure that Arizonans have a 4-year tax conformity so they don't get penalized from the IRS for having to go back and refile. That's why we have tax conformity. But if you look at some of these folks who are running for office, and that is asked, we don't peel the onion back. Why is that a good thing? And they also won't tell you, well, guess what? You know what? I like tax conformity. I like what's in the bill. However, do we have mechanism to backfill rural Arizona hospitals because they will lose $430 million? What's the backfill? What is your plan? If you get in office to backfill rural hospitals, we don't ask questions like that on these darn debates and or these forums. Kenny does when he's not forced to answer or ask a question. If Kenny, because I've been on the radio with Kenny a lot of times, more times than I can talk, or more times than I know. And Kenny will ask you questions that if you don't know the answer to, you better find out and tell somebody. But in forums, with the exception of Kenny, we get asked questions that, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with these folks who put these on. I am grateful they do that. However, let's start doing some tough questions and debate. Find out what that person's. Why do you defend the Second Amendment? Why do you? We know Republicans love the Second Amendment. I love the Second Amendment, but why? Why? And how was the Second Amendment? Why was it established? Who did it benefit? How does it benefit Arizona? What type of carry laws do we have in Arizona? What are you going to do if the other side tries to take away those rights? They're not going to tell you that Arizona has the strictest Second Amendment laws in the country. They're not going to tell you that because they won't know, because that's in the Constitution. Or how about, I don't know, the abortion issue? On the books in the Arizona Constitution before the proposition went up and got passed, and now we have abortion at demand, I guess. In the Constitution, it said that if you have an abortion in Arizona, then you will be convicted of manslaughter if you have anything to do with the abortion, to include the doctor, or if you are having that abortion, just having it, unless there is danger to the mother or that baby. A lot of people didn't know that. I ran a bill to codify that in law. I had more Republicans that came out against me because I was codifying something in the law that was already there. And now, guess what we got? Those are the type of questions. What are you going to do to pull back, or to, you can't take anything out of the Constitution, but what are you going to do to try to fix this? And you need candidates to have intestinal, political fortitude. Sometimes for that issue, the AB issue, it should depend on the life of the mother, the life of the baby. It should depend on if it's incest or that mother was raped. Medical emergencies. But folks don't know also, it's a medical emergency. It's not an abortion anymore. It is a life-saving procedure that doctors have to follow. Why? It's because it's in their Hippocratical oath. So instead of having candidates get up there, I'm for pro-life. Yeah, we know you're for pro-life. Why? Why are you for pro-life? Why are you for the Second Amendment? Why are you for small government? Why And how will you cross the aisle to protect small rural communities from losing revenue-based tax dollars from food tax? And are you willing to stand up against a party, and I don't like taxes, and say, guess what, guys? That might work in Maricopa and Phoenix, but it's not going to work in Snowflake or Taylor or Holbrook or Heber. Show low, because we don't have a second and third and fourth revenue base to backfill those dollars we're going to lose. We don't have the money to fund our police, our roads, city roads, our fire district. We don't have the money to do that if we don't have a food tax. We don't do those types of debates. You know what we do? We send something in the mail and say that person is for taxes and they're a rhino. And then the candidate who doesn't know crap runs around and repeats what the mailer says and has no clue of why rural counties need a food tax. Oh, and one other thing. So our property taxes don't get raised because they have to get the money from somewhere. I don't know. So next year, I'm gonna put that up. Next year, or when we get into the cycle again, how about we have some spirited, healthy debates? I'm not talking clean, the stuff they do on clean elections. Some spirited debates. The only one that I've seen was the Attorney General's debate. That's the only one. I mean, they were beating each other up. I got it. But that's the only one I've really seen. We're electing people who don't know what the hell they are doing or why we are doing it at the state level. That's what we are electing. And you really need to know what you are doing in the Arizona House and the Senate, because we directly affect your life more than the federal government. Directly. The federal government screws it up half the time, and we screw it up too. We screw it up because we got some of the people that shouldn't be down there that are I don't know how they've gotten through prime. Well, I know how they've gotten through the elections. We got to do a better job. Next year, let's try to do that. Let's try to get more involved. And this doesn't apply to everybody. If you're going to hold a debate, and anybody can hold a debate, you can get a club, or you can get a group of people, have them come to your house, and you can talk to them. You can talk to that candidate. You can ask them questions. You can ask them the questions that apply to you, apply to your neighborhood, your community, your district, your state. You don't have to wait to go to a GOP meeting or wherever you go. You don't have to wait to do that. You get a group of people in your community. You say, I'm hosting a meet and greet, and we are going to be asking tough questions. We would love for you to come by. But that's what you do. Special interest groups should not have a say on who gets on your ballot and who represents you in the Arizona House. And as long as we are going to let that happen, we will get what we got. And what do I always say? You get what you got, and you got what you deserve. That's what our drill sergeant used to say to me. Let me look at this one. Hard to have debates when certain candidates refuse to do them. Bam. A certain governor did that last election and is doing it again this time. It's mind-boggling. Katie Hobbs, why aren't you doing debates? Why aren't you doing debates? I think you should be doing debates. As I said, you know, that's like going to buy a car and the salesperson refuses to let you test drive it. That's what it is. Would you buy a car if the salesperson said, "Oh, I'm going to sell this car to you, but I'm not going to let you look under the hood. I'm not going to let you test drive it. I'm not going to let you look at the tires, kick the tires. I'm not going to let you do any of that. But I'm going to take your money and you're going to get on the road and drive this car without knowing if the car works or not." If you are a candidate running for office, you should be debating it, especially if you are a governor running for office. The last time I seen a governor's debate is when Doug Ducey ran against, I think it was his second time he ran. I forget the guy's name. It was in the general election. They had debates. I saw something on TV where they had something with the primary candidates. I wouldn't really call that a debate. But after tomorrow, when we know who is in the general, there should be a call to action where both candidates get up there and debate. They both get up there and they debate the issues and how they are going to address those issues. And then hold them to that standard of what they said they are going to do. And see if their narrative changes. Because you cannot assess someone who is wanting a job like that without standing in front of people debating tough questions to the candidate, not the questions we already know that they support. What Republican candidate is going to stand in front of somebody on a forum and say that they are against the Second Amendment? What candidate do you know is going to say, well, I'm against the Second Amendment and I'm a Republican? Or what have you? What candidate is going to do that? None. They are not going to do that. And we shouldn't run with that when we go to the polls. Well, they're for the Second Amendment. Of course they are for the Second Amendment. They're Republican. They're going to say that. And maybe they go home and die and not be for the Second Amendment. Of course they are going to say they are for the Second Amendment. Just like a Democrat is going to say that they are pro-choice. And I really don't care what they debate about in their primaries. But why are we asking questions that we already know the answers to in some of these forums? And then at the end of the day, we look at who's in office. We're like, wow, how did that person get up there? Well, hell, you asked them the basic questions. But this doesn't apply to everyone because I know I've had some tough questions and I've been able to answer them. But it's hard to put out the noise, and I'm going to say this, of the bullshit that come from this populism, these mailers All this other stuff that comes out, it does not tell you what that candidate is about, what that candidate is capable of doing. Everybody wants to run for office until it's time to run for office. And that means critical thinking as the candidate, critical thinking. Not that you just support something, but why do you support it? How does that benefit my community, my district, my state? And how are you going to get there? We have some people that are running for office that don't even know what the K through 12 budget is. Now, I'm not saying that you should know all the candidates should know all the nuances of how we get there. But for Christ's sake, the K through 12 budget is over half of the general fund budget. Or why are we increasing the budget every single year? Why is it growing every single year? I'll tell you why it's growing every single year. And some people are not going to want to hear this because we get more people into Arizona than any other state every single day, up to 430. I think it's 430 people a day coming to Arizona. That's why our budget's growing. Think of you having a family. When you were single, your budget was like this. You lived in a tiny place. You probably ate popcorn and cheese balls. You washed your clothes because you probably just had, I don't know what you had. When you got married, your budget grew because your household grew, because your resources needed to extend. When you got kids, it grew. When you sent your kids to college, it grew. When inflation came in, it grew. There is no way that I could run my household on the budget that I had when I was single. Married for 20 years, and 20 years, 5 children later, 3 of them put through college. There is no way that I could run my house on a $900 private budget today. And some people don't want to hear that. I don't like when the budget grows. It's bad business. However, when it does grow, are we reinvesting into Arizona? Are we reinvesting? In what parts do we need to reinvest in? But when somebody just says we're spending more money, we're spending too much money. Yeah, we are. 17 point something billion dollars. When I got into office, it was $10 billion. Now it's $17 billion. It is $17 billion because Arizona grows. Just like your household. But you have to have political courage to be able to say that. But we'll have some people to get on the stage, well, I don't want they're spending too much. They're spending like a bunch of drunken sailors. Okay. Why are they spending that way? Why? So I'm going to get up on out of here. I think I've said enough. Everybody, I want you to know that I really appreciate you signing on to my lives. Tomorrow's election day. At the end of the day, we are all Americans. At the end of the day, we all want our children to be able to grow up in a community that is safe, a community where we can choose where our kids go to school, a community where we can worship how we worship, we can exercise our First Amendment rights. Those are things that we all want. This is not a war between Americans. Because when we have a war like this, all we are doing is we are shooting each other in a circular firing squad. And then after the votes are casted, the new people are elected, and we are still shooting each other in the face. One of these days, we're going to ask ourselves, why don't we stop and think about who we are putting in our offices? How about we stop and do that? It is our responsibility as voters to ensure that we do our homework to put the right person in office and not the person that you like. The person that is going to get the job done. And when I say job done, not spouting off slogans. Anyone can do that. But it takes a real warrior with political courage to be able to protect their communities and get up and do it over and over and over again. Those are the types of people that we need to put in office. I'm one of those persons, and I'll gladly say it. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. My fellow NCO, they'll tell you the same thing. It is the right thing to do. Pick those candidates that chooses the hard right over the easy wrong. You look at my record, that's all I've ever done was choose the hard right over the easy wrong. We got to do that. Everybody, I hope that you enjoyed this. Again, sorry we were late, and I do apologize for us not being able to be on last night. We are on tonight, and we will not be on tomorrow night because it is the election night. We will be back on Wednesday. Correction. Yes, Wednesday, 7:30 to 8:30. We'll be back on. I'll be broadcasting possibly from the Valley tomorrow in Phoenix. I got to go down and do some work for the people, and I'll be doing that. Again, if you want to reach out to me, all you need to do is make sure that you reach out to either my Facebook. You can reach out to me on Twitter, or you can go to my website. You can do that, or you can go to my office and look up Walt Blackman, Legislative District 7, and you can write me an email at wblackman@azleg.gov. Or when we have these shows again, you can call in at 435-383-811. You can do that. Or you can just log on like we try to do. And whenever I have a show, this is what we're going to do. It's going to be open. It's going to be open for folks to be able to call in. Excuse me. Be able to call in and ask those questions. Everybody, I'm Walt Blackman. Take care. God bless. Make sure you get out there and vote, and know that we are all on the same team fighting the same demons. Everybody take care. God bless.